Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share the program so that your friends can join in the conversation. Also, if you haven't already done so, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And in the case of YouTube and Facebook, make sure you hit the notification button. That way you can get the notifications as soon as we go live, and you can participate in the live chat as the program is going on. Also, make sure to visit fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. It is the place to go to get all of your Pro 2A swag. I'm talking, T-shirts. I'm talking tank tops. I'm talking coffee mugs. I'm talking hoodies. You name it. It is available all there, whether it's for your significant other, whether it's for your home or for your office. You can find all sorts of stuff there. Even if you're looking to just make sure that, you want to be COVID safe. But you want to make sure that you send a proper message while being COVID safe. You can find that there as well. All of it, once again, is at fpcgear.com. Now, the best thing about fpcgear.com is every dollar that you spend goes right back into the fight for a right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. All right, let's get on to today's topic. Once again, we talk a lot about the Second Amendment. And, a lot of people think they know what the Second Amendment is, and a lot of us, quite frankly, who've been involved in this for a while, even we don't necessarily fully know or understand what the Second Amendment is sometimes. Like, for example, until recently, many people believed that the Second Amendment was all about guns. Well, no, it's not. It's really about, once again, that fundamental right that you have for self-defense, the ability to be able to defend oneself. Now, we enumerate that in our Constitution via the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. But it's important for us to understand that the right to bear arms doesn't just mean guns. It can include knives. It can include blunt objects. It can include even stun guns. There was a recent court ruling that actually noted that stun guns or other less than lethal methods of self-defense are, in fact, actually considered amongst arms. Now, the other thing that many people don't stop and realize that is included is quite frankly, armor. See, think about this. You always have people on the anti-gun side who are trying to say, well, the Second Amendment, they didn't have machine guns or they didn't have automatic weapons or anything. They didn't have AR-15s back then. So how could that be covered by the Second Amendment? Well, one of the things that's interesting about that whole conversation is this. They did have armor back then. So why wouldn't armor be considered covered by the Second Amendment? Well, evidently they don't believe so, because right now there is an effort in Congress, and you guys have probably been hearing about this particular piece of legislation. It's HR4568, which would basically ban the private ownership of body armor, or at least the most effective body armor that is available out there. To talk with you a little bit about about that particular piece of legislation and kind of give you an update on exactly what it is, we have Matt LaRosiere, the Director of Legal Policy for the Firearms Policy Coalition, who's going to kind of give you a brief update on exactly what it is.
Hey guys, Matt LaRosiere here with Firearms Policy Coalition, and today I'm here to talk to you about HR4568, also known as the Responsible Body Armor Possession Act. Introduced by Representative Grace Meng of New York, it would make it illegal for civilians to own NIJ Type 3 or better body armor. And just note that level 3 is basically the lowest level of body armor that's useful against anything more than handguns. Now, this isn't a we're coming for your plates bill a la Beto O'Rourke, but it's more of a watered down ban that grandfathers in armor you already owned. I'm always against bans that grandfather purchasers and exempt law enforcement, and this one does both. The grandfather provisions, I've always felt, are just calculated to get moderates to bend or to avoid paying just compensation. It's not out of the goodness of their hearts. It's a ban, plain and simple, and we can't stand for it.
Exactly, folks. It is a ban. It's nothing less than a ban. And he is, by the way, is 100% correct. We've seen that happen time and time again here in California. Number one, where they introduce this legislation and they say, well, if you have it, you'll get to keep it. Well, the first issue with that is that then later they come back and say, yeah, no, we don't even want you to have it, even if you already have it. One only need to take a look at, well, certain firearms that have been banned in California that were grandfathered in, that are no longer grandfathered in. One only need to look at magazines, standard capacity magazines, right here, once again, in the state of California, that were grandfathered in, and now, well, now they've come forth and they brought forth legislation to just out and outright ban the possession of them. So we all know that that's exactly what they're going to do, and that they're going to come back after it. The other thing that they do is that they we'll get into this real quick. We'll get into some of the matter of fact. Let's go ahead and let's get into the details of the legislation. Okay, so first of all, it's important to note what this is this would ban the purchase or ownership, possession of enhanced body armor by civilians, with some exceptions. Now, we want to note. And when you talk about advanced body armor, we're talking about level 3, not like level 1 and level 2, which is like knives and handguns. Level 3 is the lowest level that of body armor that actually is effective against something, once again, other than handguns, as Matt noted in his commentary. Okay. Additionally, it would make a federal felony, and violators would be fined, imprisoned for not more than 10 years or both. Now, the reason why that is important to note is they want to make it seem like, well, it's not going to be really bad. It's going to be less than 10 years or a small fine. But here's the thing. It's a felony, which means it's a prohibiting offense, right? It means that you will now be prohibited from being able to own or possess firearms, in which case you probably need body armor even more, seeing as how you can't shoot back. Anyway, but that's an important thing to note. Once again, this is a way in which they're trying to further restrict the number of people or who is eligible to be able to own or possess firearms. Okay, now let's get into some of the exceptions. It would allow for keeping of enhanced body armor that was lawfully possessed by any person at any time before the date this section takes effect. Now, normally with a grandfathering in, or with any particular law, it would be on them to prove that you didn't own it, right? I don't know if that, in fact, would carry over into this. I'm believing that it would. Once again, I'm not a lawyer, and I did not sleep in a Holiday Inn Express last night. But keep in mind, once again, with this grandfathered in clause, so yeah, if you already own it, but there's nothing keeping law enforcement or someone who wants to arrest you from arresting you. Well, then you've got to prove well, I don't know if you'd have to prove then after the fact, but it would be on them to prove that you owned it. But that they could still arrest you, and they could still, as a matter of a plea bargain, and we all know that 94% of all federal felonies are actually plea bargains. Maybe what they do as a part of that plea bargain is say, tell you what, we'll drop these charges. You just let us keep and destroy the armor. Well, guess what? They already do that oftentimes with firearms. We've had instances where we've gone to court with law enforcement, and guess what wound up happening? Yeah, they were able to convince the client to do a plea bargain, and they in fact destroyed the weapon, even though the weapon was not necessarily in violation of the law. So once again, keep in mind that you never know exactly how these grandfather things play out. The other thing to note about any of these grandfathered clauses is eventually they will come back for it. Once they've got it grandfathered in, then they come back and they say, oh, well, there's so many people out there and it's so impossible for us to prove that someone didn't own it before it was banned that there's no way we could possibly prove it. So we now have to just ban it outright. That's what they've done with magazines in the state of California. So if they're going to do it with magazines, what makes you think they're not going to turn around and do it with body armor? There's no reason to believe that they wouldn't. Okay, now it also exempts any U.S. government agency or department. Okay, so let's think about why that's an issue. If the Second Amendment is about us being able to protect ourselves from tyranny, even up to and including a tyrannical government, why should the government be able to more properly defend itself than an individual ought to be able to defend themselves? I mean, that's really what it comes down to, isn't it? Why does the government get to exempt itself, but law-abiding citizens do not? Think about that. And then finally, exempts current and former law enforcement officers, which, by the way, happens to be an equal protection issue, because former law enforcement officers, they don't have any more arrest power or arrest authority or authority to arrest anybody than you or I do. They I stress the word might, have more training. They definitely would probably have more experience in terms of law enforcement, but they, once again, under law, have no more authority than you or I do. So why is it exactly they ought to be exempted? And by the way, the reason why they do this, it's not because they believe that they should be exempted. It's that this helps them get law enforcement organizations to move out of the way. Many, many times on issues on bans and restrictions, law enforcement will come out in opposition, and then these groups will then go to those law enforcement unions, and they'll convince them, well, if we exempt your members, both current and retired, will you remove your opposition? And they generally, oftentimes, have tended to remove their opposition from the bill. And in some cases, they've even come out in support of the measure once their members have been exempted. I can't speak to all law enforcement unions. I'm not speaking to them all. I'm not speaking to every particular piece of gun control where that's happened. But I can tell you, oftentimes, that is exactly what winds up happening. All right, so what does this mean, folks? This basically means that you have Representative Grace Meng. She wants to ban body armor, and she wants to leave you defenseless. Folks, we cannot have that. So what do we need you to do? We need you to go to bodyarmorban.com. That's bodyarmorban.com. Once you get there, you can read the bill for yourself. You can read the details. You can look and see what members are sponsoring or co-sponsoring the legislation, and you can send a message yourself. It can either be your own words, you can type your own words, or there's already a pre-written message there that you can use, that you can edit, or you can send it as is. But it's vitally important that you guys take the time to get active and make your voice heard on this. Folks, once again, this is about nothing less than protecting your Second Amendment rights, all right? Your ability to be able to defend yourself. And what's interesting about this is we're not even talking about an offensive weapon. We're talking about something defensive. We're talking about the ability to be able to protect yourself, protect your family, whether it's having body armor plates and backpacks and things like that for your kids. All of these things could potentially be in danger, all because, these folks think that it's scary. They think that only scary people want body armor. Well, some of us want to be able to protect ourselves from those scary people. And the only way in which we can do that is if we are allowed to fully exercise our right to keep and bear arms. There's no reason for them to be able to introduce legislation like this. And by the way, you guys have probably heard a lot of chatter on this. That's the reason why so many people are talking about it, because there's a fear that this might start to move. You guys, you've been following what's been going on all across the country in many, many places. You know that shootings are up. You know that there's riots. You know that there are that people are looting. And quite frankly, we know that you want to take greater steps to be able to defend yourselves. Do not, absolutely positively, do not let the federal government take that right away from you. So make sure your voice is heard. Make sure you go to bodyarmorban.com. All right, folks, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing the program. Telling your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them, or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.